usual, this meeting will be live streamed. So if you can start with agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. I think we've had one apology from Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yes, and also Joanna Wardman.
Joanna, thank you. Okay, agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Anyone got anything to declare? No, thank you. Agenda item 3 is exclusions of the press and public. On this one, officers have identified that agenda item 8, appendix 4, contains some exempt information. And they've recommended that the public interest in maintaining exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. They have outlined their reasons in the report, but the committee are asked to consider the officer's recommendation to treat this item as exempt. Are you in agreement? Yeah, lovely, thank you. So agenda item 4 is the minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 24th of July. Has anybody got any comments on those? No? Thank you. Can we take those as read then, please? Right, so our next item, agenda item 5, is the progress on internal audit. I think, Farhan, could I ask you to take us through any key points in the paper, please?
Thanks, Chair. As stated, we present our regular progress update against the internal audit plan for 23-24. I'll just run through the appendix. In terms of page 2, there's a summary against our key areas of monitoring and focus. Members will know that, albeit progress is being made against the plan, it's not where we would like to be at this stage, but again, we have plans and resources in terms of a plan in place to sort of complete the work hopefully by the end of the year, and we are positive that the majority of the work will be completed, and to give an audit opinion on our work. In terms of pages 3 to 8, the members are asked to note a summary of our work to date. One audit report has been issued on GDPR, which was a reasonable assurance rating, so that was given a positive assurance. In terms of the other key areas of work, work around AEB, the adult education budget, that's ongoing. One review has recently been completed, which is an update from this paper. That was given a minimal assurance rating, and some feedback will be provided at the next update to this committee. Again, the significant amount of work has been done around counter fraud activity, which, as members will note, has increased this year. Again, that's another area where our counter fraud officer is who's sort of skilled in this area. She will be leaving the organisation shortly, so that's another area that we'll have to look at ways of how we manage that piece of work. So then, in terms, that's a summary of the work. In terms of at page 8, members will note a summary against our audit plan. Gives some indication of progress against some of the work that we're completing to date. In terms of the actual plan itself, some of the work has been put back towards quarter 3 and quarter 4, as you will note. But again, as stated, we are positive that we should be able to complete the majority of the work. Page 9 provides members with some indication of some of the work that we do around following up recommendations. Members will note there was a significant piece of work that was done last year around transport recommendations, and that makes up a bulk of the in progress or outstanding recommendations that we are working towards, working with management to implement those recommendations. In terms of page 11 and 12, there's some feedback around our performance measures and feedback we receive from clients in terms of the quality of our audit work. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions on that? Councillor Scullion.
Thank you. Thank you for the report and the focus in terms of the work and the absolutely key focuses in terms of things like transport, corporate systems, cybersecurity, those kind of things. AAB, AEB. Absolutely right. But I just wanted to touch on 2.1 and recruitment, and you haven't said retention, but it's obviously recruitment and retention from what you said. Chair, I was on Friday morning, I was at the Local Government Association because I've been appointed to their Improvement and Innovation Board. And questions of recruitment and retention were raised there. And a short report was given by the Local Government Association officers at the meeting about the new National Graduate Trainee Programme, and some of you from councils will have just taken on a new batch of people there. The LGA and the National Graduate Trainee Programme and the London councils have worked together, and I don't know the details of the funding, it wasn't really appropriate to ask in the meeting. They have taken on 50 national graduate trainees from the programme, just left university from a variety of backgrounds, and they've taken on 50 trainees, and I think the LGA are in fact helping to fund this, and they're working with SIPFA, jointly with SIPFA as well, and they are going to basically take these people on and train them to SIPFA level 7. I mean, I wasn't entirely sure what that was, and I thought, what a good idea, because actually it's about short-term thinking versus medium and long-term thinking. Not all of these people will be retained, but actually SIPFA level 7 sounds like something that would be very useful to us in West Yorkshire. I thought, well, London councils, local government associations in London, there are only 2 northern councils in this meeting, and I wrote down in my back of the envelope, I thought, West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So I guess, Chair, I'm asking whether officers could look into whether, maybe a smaller scale scheme given the relative size, whether there's something longer term. We might have missed the boat for this year, but is there something that the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, SIPFA, LGA and the councils concerned can actually look in terms of trying to get a pipeline of longer term folk?
Thank you for that. That sounds like a really good idea. Any of the officers want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Scullin. Sounds like a really interesting programme for us to look into. Be really, really up for looking at that. We are talking to the LGA already about workforce planning. They do an offer for us, or they have an offer around supporting organisations with workforce planning, including graduate programmes, and so we're talking to them about that. We're also exploring with the Inclusive Growth Network some work that they are keen to explore around grad programmes too. In terms of internal audit specifically, I think we're looking at kind of both, or recruitment at least 2 levels. The first is recruiting people who have already qualified and bringing in that expertise, but at the same time recognising that actually a different approach would be to us recruit people who are pre-qualification and enabling them to develop their qualifications here, which that programme that you've referred to would help with. Do you want to add anything, Fahim?
I mean, there's definitely been a skills gap. We've done a couple of rounds of recruitment where we've not been able to attract the right candidates with the right skill sets. I think there will be a proposal coming forward, and the head of audit is working on a revised business plan, not only for the team as itself, but it also, as Alan mentions, in terms of attracting qualified people, but as well equally having a programme of training where we can bring in new recruits, like I said, graduates, and upskill them, and so that will hopefully be brought to this committee at a later point when that piece of work is completed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the fraud section, I just wonder if you could two questions. Is that normal? Is not the right word, but is it on parity with other similar authorities? And what's the opportunity for us to follow through I appreciate you wouldn't be able to tell us about ongoing investigations, but what's the opportunity for us to follow through when those investigations are concluded and understand what happened and why and what we can learn?
Thanks. In terms of benchmarking against other local authorities, we haven't actually done that piece of work, but that's something we could look at. In terms of fraud investigation, I think part of it is, some of that is around proactive fraud work, where, for example, we've got the whistleblowing hotlines. So some members of the public, or even internally, that's been used more because it's been advertised in terms of that's available to report issues. And equally, some of that is where officers have referred issues to ourselves. But in terms of trends, it's early days, but to sort of analyse that in terms of where we have been with previous years, in terms of whether it's an ongoing and increasing area of focus, and in terms of, and also our work. So it's difficult to say at the moment, but I mean, in terms of reporting back, that's something we could look at and bring forward in terms of what sort of information you want for this, for some of the outcomes from these sort of reviews. So happy to take back any suggestions.
Thank you. I think that's a good suggestion, because if we try and benchmark, it will give us a feel for how we compare to others. So I think that would be useful if you could do that, please. Any other questions from members? No? So I've got a couple, if we may, please. We've got quite a long list there of outstanding audits, and I know you've had carry forward in previous years because you've been in a similar position in terms of resource. I'm just wondering how this committee can gain assurance that the most important areas are being looked at first.
Thanks, Chair. That's a valid question. The plan was part of the planning around the plan has taken precedent in terms of when it's best to carry out the reviews. In terms of officer availability, and also in terms of when, like for example, if you're looking at the finance system, when you've got suitable transactions that you can actually review. But I take the point that maybe at this stage we may look at focusing on those areas that are higher risks and completing those first. So it might be a case of us going back and looking at the plan and prioritising some of them pieces of the work.
Thank you. And can your plan be RAG rated maybe, or have something in there so that we understand that you've done that piece of work?
So do you mean in terms of completion of?
In terms of actually looking at the priority ones, so the priority ones can be identified in the report rather than just being a long list.
Yeah, happy to take that suggestion back and bring forward to the next committee.
Yes, Councillor Ram.
Yeah, just on that, I think it'd be useful to add a couple of columns to the table, just to sort of say when do we think it's due to be completed, and perhaps to have it RAG rated as well, so we can easily see at a glance, A, it's overdue, and B, it's overdue and we should be worried about it because it needs to be done.
Happy to take that back.
That's lovely, thank you. And I've got one other question as well, please. I'm just slightly concerned about the transport line on the audit follow-ups. There seems to be a substantial proportion there that are overdue. So really to know why and what's happening, if you can, please.
Sure. In terms of the transport review that was done last year, the meeting was held with key officers last week to follow up some of those recommendations. Part of that is new officers coming into place within the transport services, so then picking up some of the issues around the report itself. Secondly, a new ICS system was some of those recommendations were reliant on that being implemented, and with delays with that implementation, and now that coming forward, I think in November. So work is ongoing in terms of ensuring that those are implemented, and I think we should be able to bring back more of an update at the next committee meeting in terms of where progress is against those recommendations. But it's not that we haven't forgotten about those. We are working closely with the management within transport services to ensure that those are implemented.
Okay, thank you. Because it said as well that you had a follow-up audit planned for October. So has that actually been done, or is it planned still for October?
The follow-up. Like I said, we had a meeting last week, so that was the follow-up, and they've taken back and we'll bring forward a plan in terms of how they are proposing to implement those recommendations.
Okay, that's lovely. So could we maybe take a bit of a closer look at that next time if the position hasn't changed substantially?
Yeah, sure. I could bring something back next time.
That's lovely. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions on that item? No. Thank you. So we've got a couple of matters there. If we can just make sure we don't lose them. One around the benchmarking and one around exploring opportunities for development. Thank you. And then if we can just note that that item has been considered. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 6, and that's the update on external audit. So, Angela, is that you, please?
It is, thank you, Chair. This probably feels a little like the report we brought last time. So, just taking it in turn, the 21-22 audit accounts, you saw those much earlier in the year. That work was substantially complete. I think we have talked about the national issues that are affecting audit and that are contributing to additional work that has been mandated nationally that's required to conclude the audit. So we are almost there on the revisiting the final pension items on 21-22. Unfortunately, been a delay on the actuary side who are providing us information, but we are within touching distance, so we hope to get 21-22 signed off once we have an update on when the actuary is going to be able to provide us some additional information. Because of that, the 22-23 audit is slightly in limbo because we're waiting to finalise 21-22 as a priority, which we've agreed here between ourselves and the auditors. So the work again is complete on 22-23. We've prepared the accounts. We are waiting until we finish 21-22 for any knock-on effects to then formally finalise 22-23. And we've been talking to the auditors that there's potentially an opportunity to commence that audit in the new year, which is only a couple of months away. However, this is probably all swept up a little by the financial reporting and audit in local authorities. So at 2.9, just as a brief reminder of the national challenges. The statement that was issued earlier in the year is attached as the appendix. What we are seeing here is very similar to every other local authority across the country. I'm sure you've seen it in your own. I'm not sure any locally have been agreed. Public sector audit appointments issued an update last week on the audits that have been complete by the end of September, which is the statutory date. There were 5 nationally. There's a further, let me quote the figures, they've been published, it's not a secret. There are currently 918 delayed audit opinions for 21-22 and 22-23 in local government. We are a part of that situation. DLUC are still working on a solution to this and are talking about a backstop date potentially, and finding a means to draw a line under the current outstanding audit so the focus can be on the future. We're expecting a consultation on that. I'm still not aware that's come out yet about the best way to go about this, but there is, I think everybody's unhappy with the situation, from the audit world and the auditors to local government bodies and finance officials, members, everybody. It's deeply unsatisfactory. Government is trying to find a way to, the regulating bodies trying to find a way to solve that, but it won't be without some pain because there simply isn't enough in the system to conclude all those audits in the way that one would hope. So that's where we are in terms of audit. Then included information on the slightly slightly bizarrely juxtaposed against that, the audit fees for future audits, which again, this has been trailed a long time, that the work that should be being done by auditors, the requirements for the level of assurance, that there does need to be a certain level of work, certain focus on key areas, and that is going to increase the scale of audit fees. So there has been a publication on this. The final scale fees we expect to have by the time of the next meeting, but we are expecting an increase. As we say, in the order of 150%. That's not just us, that's nationally. Again, this is a national picture. It is the impact on us within that. So much of this is just to note at this point, but happy if there's any questions that we can answer. And Mark's here to give an auditor perspective if there's anything you would like to know from ZARS in connection with what I've said. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. There are a couple of questions, but Mark, did you want to add anything before we take the questions?
I think Angela covered everything quite succinctly.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So Councillor Scully and then Councillor Scott.
Thank you. You may be unsurprised to hear this came up at the OGA meeting on Friday as well, and I could use stronger words, but it's extremely unsatisfactory, really. And Michael Gove did actually say at the Local Government Association conference, annual conference at the beginning of July, he said he was aware of this issue. He was advising that there would be a solution found and applied. Now, it sounds as though this backstop date is the solution that he's talking about, but at the moment we have no timetable for when that is consulted upon and then applied, and it seems to me that it's actually not going to be any help for this current situation, current year, but officers may have a different view. But also, I am concerned that if people are working to a backstop date and therefore audits are limited in scope or give limited opinions, then, or modified opinions, that's very unfortunate for the local government sector, and for some years going back, in some cases actually, rather a lot of years. It's bad for our reputation, it's bad for the Deluxe reputation, and it's altogether unsatisfactory. Any glimmer, I mean, I don't often say this, Mark, but I do actually feel for the firms, because it's actually bad for the reputation of the firms as well. And I understand all the other public sector and health service work and so on that they do. It's not good for the reputation of local government, or indeed for the firms. So anything kind of reading the runes in terms of timetable for the remainder of this municipal year, feeling of when we're going to get this backstop date, and the stages that we have to go through ourselves and the firms to actually get these accounts signed off.
So I've been in a number of conversations with FDs across combined authorities and locally, and on the police side actually, there's been lots of discussion. There has been a commitment to bring a consultation forward at some pace, but it's still not here. And absolutely agree with everything you've said about reputationally. I think there are finance officers who are deeply upset by the fact they've had a career where every year they have brought their accounts, they've been audited, members have approved them, and are deeply unhappy that a modified opinion in due course reflects badly on them for having done nothing wrong at all. I think there's lots of conversation. It seems difficult to get this brought to a decision point. Consultation's been put forward. As you say, the timescales are quite tight. If the backstop date, which one of them is being proposed, is March, there are others that are later next year, but we're mid-October. It feels quite tight to come up with a solution. We have asked the question of, say, some of the regulatory bodies who are involved in this. Everybody wants an answer, but nobody seems able to bring it all together with an answer that keeps everybody happy. And I suspect whatever comes out will be unsatisfactory, probably for every party involved, because it doesn't feel that the mood music is there is not enough resource in the audit world to match now the scale of outstanding audit work. There has been discussion about legislative changes to try and reduce some of the work that's needed to be done on infrastructure and pensions, for example? Could that be temporarily suspended? Because, forgive me, we spend a lot of time looking at pensions, but it's an awful lot of disclosures and information that doesn't affect the results for the year. But that takes a disproportionate amount of time, similarly on some of the infrastructure. But again, that would take legislative changes that would take time to get through. So I think we all remain unhappy, and we are all doing our best to raise it in whichever forums we can. But we were advised we should see a consultation very, very shortly. We keep waiting.
Thank you, Chair. I believe Angela may have answered some of this. Mine was on page 23, section 2.13. The increase of the fee is to possibly 151%, especially when the paper, it actually caveats that recognising the significant financial pressures on all types of local government bodies. I think it needs a further explanation and teased out, because generally people won't understand that.
No, I think that's a fair point. It's a very difficult time to be saying we need to spend more money on something, but it bizarrely is probably one of the areas you do need that assurance that things are working properly. We'll bring forward next time the figures of what we're actually paying, what new fees look like in comparison to that, what we will get additional. Interesting, some of you may recall in previous years there has been discussion in this committee that the audit fees feel a little low for the amount of work that this committee would like the external auditors to be doing. So there may be a little bit of redressing that balance. But we also then need to pick up if the audits don't happen in the way we expect, how does that impact on audit fees? So there's quite a complex world here around putting fees up at a time when unfortunately the audit world is not able to deliver the audits that are being asked of it anyway, which is uncomfortable. But this is, the DSA needs to set the scale fee, and we'll bring it back next time and let you know a bit more information.
Can I just add to that in terms of that scale fee uplift? If you think about it in the context of additional scrutiny on audit, additional regulatory pressures on us to deliver in certain areas of the audit, and fees have gone down since the demise of the Audit Commission. So our workload's gone up, the fees have gone down, and there isn't a raft of auditors out there because obviously there's a correlation.
Thank you. Any further questions on that item? No. Okay, if we can just take that as noted then, please, and move on to the next item, agenda item 7. And there are two areas in this report. One's to consider any changes to the arrangements for internal control, and the other is to look at the proposed dashboard for this committee. So, Caroline, did you want to take us through that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as the Chair's referenced here, the first part of this report is just highlighting some of the changes in internal controls since the last time the committee met. Three changes in there that are highlighted from section 2.2 onwards. The first one is, and it is very much an internal change, is we had what was called an Officer Regulatory and Compliance Board, entirely an officer structure to look at assurance against internal controls. And as part of our move and our organisational evolution, we have transitioned that still to carry out those functions, but within what we now have, which is a corporate centre management board. So that's very much an internal officer change. I suppose the key thing here is that that board is chaired by the Chief Operating Officer and has, it sets out there at 2.2, it certainly has Angela on that, and myself, and a range of other key heads of in this sphere. Part of what we're looking to do with that is to have that, it's very much an oversight board. So when we come on to the compliance dashboard that we've provided, this is the first draft for governance and audit, we have a more detailed dashboard that we look at that level. But this is very much about where are the red flags internally, where do we need to provide those linkages back to the rest of the organisation, whether that's upwards to our strategic leadership board or sidewards to our different directorates. So it's a little bit of that second line of defence in terms of that check and challenge at an officer level. And it is also part of the route up to governance and audit in terms of what then do we share and highlight in terms of that compliance dashboard up to this committee. So that's an internal change which has literally just happened within the last month. So we will keep that under review as to how effectively that's working, and we can revise and refine that going forward. The second change I think we did reference at the last meeting, which is that we've actually pulled together the functions of internal governance, risk and compliance within one space, which is actually within my my service area, so that we're trying to have much more of a holistic handle on how all those elements link together and how aspects of one can heighten the other. So where we've got compliance issues, that that sort of then can trigger a risk that needs that further oversight. So there's work underway there, and then probably the most significant change I think organisationally is that at 2.5, which is the introduction of an integrated finance, HR and payroll system, CI Anywhere, which will be implemented next month and will for the first time actually give the sort of budgetary information and management information at a desktop level to managers and enable the sort of organisational reports to be produced that should be a game changer, I think, certainly in terms of efficiency, but certainly in terms of that transparency of information and that one truth. So we haven't got different systems saying slightly different things. We've got one which will say one thing. So that will be a big game changer for us. So they're the internal controls. I did reference the dashboard, which we talked about. So at the last meeting, we sort of brought some headlines in terms of the sorts of information that could be contained within the dashboard and took the feedback from the committee. This is very much work in progress. So it is Appendix 1 to the report is our first shot at providing that sort of information to members. We're really keen to get feedback at this meeting in terms of, is that the sort of presentation that you would hope for? We recognise that there are still gaps in some of that as we build up that data collection that we might still need to do behind the scenes to actually make this dashboard become more and more meaningful. But I'm really keen to see if that is what the committee were expecting. And we've drawn out in the report some little bits of key indicators that as officers, and we've highlighted in that section 9 from the different areas, but indeed members may have other bits of other questions or queries in terms of that as well. So I shall pause at that point. I should say the third element of this report is the financial update. I don't know whether members wish to discuss the compliance dashboard and then look at finance separately, but Gary is here able to speak to that part of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that update. And yes, should we take the finance, should we look at the dashboard first and then come back if that's okay? And just before I take questions on it, I just want to thank you for the hard work that's gone into this dashboard. I know a lot of thought and effort's been put into getting it where it is now. And personally, I think it's a really good piece of work and very valuable for this committee. But can I open it up to questions and comments and
Thank you, Chair. It's just a general comment. I think the dashboard approach has been very useful and it's been helpful to compare changes and performance. So I'll just note that it's been really, really useful.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think, again, it'd be useful to have some benchmarking on the dashboard just to see how we compare to others. And then just a quick question on the complaints. Is it possible to understand how many individuals that relates to? As in, is there a small number of people making a lot of complaints, or is that just how many people have complained? And I guess there'll be some people around the table familiar with one of my constituents who I suspect may be responsible for quite a number of those. So it'd be useful to just put that bit of context in if possible.
Did you want to come back on that, Carol?
I suppose just to say, what in terms of the complaints information, it's a question at the moment as to the the system the team are using and to whether it can provide that level of detail. I think we're starting to have those conversations back with our casework and correspondence team about refining their system to actually start to draw some of this out. So we may not be able to do that by the next meeting, but it's certainly something I can take away to look at if we can actually build that into the system. Because I totally understand it can skew the figures quite a lot with that. So if we have vexatious complainants. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Can I just go back when you said about the committee, the new committee that you're forming, and you said that one of the things you would do would sort of filter out what comes up to this committee. How can we be sure that you're filtering out the right things to come up to this committee?
That is a very fair challenge. I put myself up for that, didn't I? I think I think the purpose we'd be looking at is looking at things at a more granular level. So we'll be digging down into the detail and seeing where there is, if there is, it's that first filter in a sense. If we're looking at a compliance dashboard and there's something that raises concern at our level, is it something that can be addressed quite quickly? Because what we don't want is to delay anything for the cycle of the meetings. Where there are things where actually action can be taken, or we need to look at a policy approach or something, we need to be taking that action pretty quickly. So it's trying to take that immediate view on that. Doesn't mean to say then, I mean, what I'd anticipate something like that is we'd then report back to the committee. You'd still see the trend in the information, the figures, but there may be an explanation in the report as to what we'd actually done as a consequence.
Thank you.
Yes, we'd still ensure. I suppose this committee still has those key indicators and those key areas of compliance and risk will always be here. It's us trying to do that scrutiny on its way through to say, is it something that we can? What's going wrong? What do we need to change?
And then be able to take appropriate action at that step. Yeah, thank you. That explains it. Any other questions on the dashboard? No? Thank you. Shall we move on to the finance then, Gary? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The revenue and capital position at the end of Q1 is very much in line with where we would expect it to be. The focus now is on the outturn to the end of the year and next year's budgeting process. You will note that there are a number of timing issues in terms of income and expenditure, and that is largely down to profiling of the budget. The budgets are profiled flat across each month, whereas obviously income and expenditure isn't necessarily linear in that respect. What I would say is that the new finance system will very much help us in being able to profile and update budgets in year in line with what we're actually seeing instead of a flat 12-month profile.
Thank you. Any questions on that? No? Okay, that's lovely. Thank you for the update. Okay, so can we move on to the next agenda item then, please? Agenda item 8. And Caroline again.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the risk item. It's in two parts. The first is an update in terms of the risk management strategy and the work that's happened on that over the summer and the proposed next steps. We've looked, and the second part, of course, is the corporate risk register, which is appended. Just in terms of the strategy initially, we've looked at our existing strategy. We haven't got we don't have a risk manager as such in post at the CA at the moment. That is something that we're looking to move towards. But in terms of is the strategy fit for purpose, I think our general view was it largely is. It needs revising slightly to reflect the organisational changes, but it's our priority at the moment, I think, is ensuring that existing strategy is effectively embedded and implemented in the organisation. And that is the preferred course of action rather than spending time on putting a new strategy in, which might be an improvement at some point in the future. The intention here is to hardwire the existing strategy into the new organisational structure. And if that's doing our 80-20, I think that provides us with a really strong baseline to build from. So that is our approach to do that. I've highlighted here that it is that hard wiring behind the scenes. I think as we've moved to new outcome-focused directorates and indeed a number of new directors as well, are we actually capturing risk effectively at those levels that escalate up through the organisation? And there is more work to do with that. We are speaking to other combined authorities who have done things in a slightly different way and have maybe got that holistic model, I think, in terms of risk. So in terms of particularly things like programs and projects, where risk is being managed within the project, how are we ensuring that that is then, we have some greater transparency of that, maybe at a higher level in terms of where we might have some competing risks at the same time. How is that feeding through? So that's where we're going to concentrate our capacity and our effort over the next few months, together with a look at the organisation's current risk appetite statement and risk evaluation guidance. Do they reflect the current context, the national context and the pressures out there? So that's our approach. My intention is to update this committee at its next meeting and continue to do so in terms of what's changed and what's happened in between those on that approach. The second part of the report does set out the corporate risk register, and I think, as I've said there at 211, we took the decision to actually compile a new strategic register to say, okay, at this point in time, let's workshop it with senior leadership team, with senior managers, and let's look sort of afresh as to what those strategic risks are. And that's there at Appendix 1 for members and certainly for questions and scrutiny on that. I've also attached their Appendices 2 and 3 are the actual evaluation guidance and the risk matrix to provide the explanation as to, well, how do we reach that assessment as to the level of risk on each of those ratings. We have 3 risks there, 2 risks and 1 issue categorised as very high, which is the cyber security, the funding uncertainty, which is the national position, and the possibility of market failure and reduced provision of bus services. The mitigations are there in the risk register as one would expect. The risk ratings are those based on the risk with the current mitigations in place. To the right of that, we have further mitigations that are proposed. And what I'd like to do, the aim is in terms of future iterations of this, is that we move to develop an action plan approach around those further mitigations so that we actually have clear owners' target dates for each of those, so that this committee in particular and senior leadership can monitor, are we hitting those deadlines? Are those further mitigations becoming existing mitigations? And do some RAG rating across those so that members can easily see that and we can see it as a senior team. So that's the intention for the next iteration, together with moving towards sharing the high and very high risks from the directorates with this committee, as well as the strategic risks, so that you can see those in context and see what is being managed within the organisation. So, Chair, I shall pause there. We do have, as you referenced at the start, the detail in terms of the mitigations for the cyber security risks are contained in the exempt appendix. We would need to go into closed session. We don't have any press or public here, but we would close the streaming if anybody wanted to ask any questions on that part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I just check with members, is anyone wanting to pose a question on Appendix 4? So can we take that at the end then, or should we close the live streaming now?
If people have comments on the public report or appendix, we can do that now and then go into private session. Councillor Scullion, question. Yeah.
Afterwards?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that okay? So we'll wait till after.
Yeah, it's just a general question. It's a difficult one, but does putting it on the register like this, which is a public document, increase the risk of a cyber attack, given the fact that you can see that we're open to it?
I think the reality is that any large public body, I think it's fairly common knowledge that cyber security risks is one of the biggest risks that any organisation carries. So I don't think it increases our risk just to highlight that. I think if our mitigations were published, then it would be clear. It might provide some intelligence to those out there as to how to target us. So we felt it's fair enough to have it there as a general threat, because one would expect any large body to have that. To be honest, and recognise that is just an ongoing threat. But yes, that's where we've tried to hit the balance.
Thank you. Any other general questions before we take the closed questions? No? So can we
I'll just message Ian.
do that? Thank you. Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 9, which is the corporate governance update. And I think, Caroline, is that you again? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. We brought, at the last meeting of this committee in July, members saw a draft of the Code of Corporate Governance, and we said we would look to see if it needed further revisions and bring it back to this committee, which we've done this time. It is there as Appendix 1. As members will see, only minor changes have been made at this point. I think a lot of the revisions had been actually achieved at the time it came to the last committee. So these are shown as track changes for ease of reference, but relate primarily to the governance changes brought about by the integration of the LEP board into the combined authority. Have, however, taken the opportunity to bring forward to the committee the draft annual governance statement, which would usually come as part of the accounts, but of course they've been delayed as we've heard. So the annual governance statement itself, we are halfway through this year to be bringing it, but I think it's still important to share that. And of course, it is a legal requirement for us to produce it. So this effectively looks back over 22-23 in terms of the framework set by the code, and effectively gives an assessment as to how well we have met those principles within the code. And then it also looks forward to this year to say, actually, given where we are, what are the things that we want to focus on this year as well. So the draft statement is attached there as Appendix 2 for members. It highlights a number of key changes which have taken place over the last financial year, and reference there at paragraph 2.7, which include the exit of regional policing procurement arrangements, the integration of the LEP, and changes arising from the internal organisational restructure. That paragraph also confirms that the head of internal audit has reached the opinion that overall our framework of control and governance is operating adequately. So the detail of that is contained in the statement. Section 7 of that statement then goes on to propose a governance improvement plan for this year, and that highlights key areas of focus and activities which we believe will help improve our governance arrangements. And this year we are recommending that we focus on officer decision making, given the changes in our structures, risk management, and I've referenced some of those improvements we want to make in the earlier agenda item. Compliance, to continue to develop that dashboard, transparency, and policing and crime, and that's around our regional procurement activity. So the proposal is that certainly welcome feedback from this committee, but that we would look to provide updates and for that work to be monitored by this committee over the remaining course of this year, recognising that actually some of that might run on into 24-25 in terms of continued improvements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I was quite pleased with that report. I thought it was very thorough, and actually it didn't, in your action plan, there was nothing in there that we didn't expect to see. So that was really reassuring from my point of view. So thank you for that. I think the proposal is that subject to any changes proposed by this committee, the draft code will be considered by the combined authority at its next meeting on the 7th of December, is that right?
That's correct,
Yeah,
Chair, yes.
yeah. So are there any questions or comments from any members at this stage? Councillor Scott.
Just happy to endorse this. Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Lamb? No? No? Okay, so I think we're happy to endorse that is put forward to the next meeting of the combined authority. Thank you.
Chair.
Okay, so that brings us on to our last agenda item, and that's agenda item 10, and that's the update on developments of the bus reform. And Alex, I think you joined us to take us through that, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll just give a few introductory remarks in terms of the paper. So the purpose of the paper is really just to update the committee on developments of the bus reform programme. As members may already be aware, the Combined Authority has been following the statutory process of conducting an assessment on bus reform since June of 2021. In May of this year, the Combined Authority received a draft of that assessment and approved submitting a finalised assessment to be independently audited in requirements with the legislation. So Grant Thornton were appointed as the independent auditors and were instructed to prepare a report in accordance with the Transport Act, which was provided to the Combined Authority in September. The report of the auditors concluded that the information relied on was of sufficient quality, that the analysis of the information was of sufficient quality, and that the Combined Authority had due regard to the relevant guidance. So that report was provided to the Combined Authority in the September CA meeting. In addition to the report, auditors have provided a number of observations, which were also provided to the Combined Authority alongside responses to those observations. And then the Combined Authority in September agreed to proceed to the next step in terms of the process, and that is a consultation of the assessment and therefore to approve publication of all related materials. And so since publication of papers for this meeting, that consultation has now gone live and will remain live until the 7th of January.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, and we'll see, does this committee get to see the results of the consultation or not as such?
Okay.
Yeah, we can bring results back.
Yeah, that'd be of
helpful.
interest to members.
Okay, so will that be in advance of the decision making by the authority?
So the consultation will conclude on the 7th of January. That will then be, all responses will be independently reviewed and will form part of materials for a decision, which will be a mayoral decision on whether to proceed or how to proceed next. So that will be ahead of March 2024. I've answered your question, Councillor. I'm sorry.
So I'm not sure if you did. Will it come back here before the decision is made?
I don't think it will. No, I think all of the information that's relevant will be presented at the Combined Authority that's due to meet in the second week of March. And there wouldn't be an intention to bring back the consultation results here before that.
Did you feel that was necessary, Councillor Lamb?
I'm just wondering what the point of it coming back here would be if the decision's taken.
Any views from the committee? No. So we're saying we don't need to see that then? There's no... Councillor Scott?
Chair, the consultation, the update of the figures or what's been fed into it, it'd be nice to see what's come through. However, I don't think there's any immediate need
to see it before it's presented. So. Okay, so it's just the timing of it so that we get the overview at this committee of the outcome. Is that right? Is that possible? Is that okay? Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you for that. And that was our last agenda item, so thank you for attending. Thank you.
Thank you.